They classified it as salvage before the scans finished. The Imperial Recovery Flotilla held station at 0.8 light seconds, watching the human vessel drift on a vector that suggested fatigue rather than intent. Its hull was dark, pitted, scarred by micrometeor strikes and patched with alloys no longer used by any modern navy. Transponder codes were archaic, partially corrupted, broadcasting an origin tag from Earth dated 72 years out of registry. The analysts logged it as a derelict that had wandered home by accident. The ship was alone, no escort signatures, no active shields, power output barely above background. Length measured 1,120 meters, large by human standards, laughable by Imperial ones. One officer joked that it looked like a museum piece dragged through vacuum for half a century. Laughter followed, brief and professional. The Empire had recovered relics before. They were always the same. Stories clinging to metal that no longer mattered. Processing asset. The designation populated the board automatically. Estimated crew under 400. Estimated resistance, none. Time to secure 18 minutes. The flotilla commander authorized approach, already drafting the report that would reduce the encounter to a footnote. The human ship did not alter course. It did not acknowledge hails. Its silence was interpreted as damage, not defiance. Long-range scans returned oddities. Internal mass distribution fluctuated subtly, as if compartments were rearranging themselves. Thermal readings showed pockets of heat where no reactors should be. A junior analyst flagged the data and suggested recalibration. The recalibration returned the same result. The anomaly was logged and deprioritized. Salvage did not require curiosity. The Empire's cultural liaison prepared the standard notification. Ownership transfer, crew detention, technology seizure. The language was polite, almost generous. The flotilla closed to 0.5 light seconds. Boarding craft spun up drives. Relic confirmed. The phrase appeared on the tactical overlay, reinforced by comparative models showing the flotilla's 3 cruisers outweighing the human vessel by a factor of 20. The commander authorized a containment sweep, low-yield energy pulses, to disable any remaining systems without damaging the hull. It was a kindness, really. The first pulse lanced out, calibrated at 6% output. It struck the human ship amidships and vanished without bloom. Sensors waited for feedback, none came. Thermal rise registered for 0.4 seconds, then flattened. Power readings on the human vessel remained unchanged. A second pulse followed at 12%. Same result, no response. The commander frowned, irritation creeping in where boredom had been. They authorized a third pulse at 25%, more than sufficient to cripple anything still pretending to be a warship. The beam struck and held for a full second. The human hull absorbed it like stone absorbs rain. "Check the sensors," someone said quietly. Diagnostics returned clean. Absorption efficiency plotted at 94.1% before stabilizing. The number sat on the display, stubborn and wrong. A murmur moved through the bridge. Salvage vessels did not do that. Relics did not do that. The human ship transmitted at last. Not a plea, not a warning. Just a narrow-band data packet containing a single line of text, time-stamped to the second. Contact acknowledged. The flotilla commander stared at the words, then at the absorption curve still glowing on the board. The laughter from earlier felt distant now, misplaced. They ordered weapons to stand by, suddenly aware that they were closer than doctrine preferred. Not. Dead, the thought was not spoken, but it was shared. The human vessel continued its silent drift, scars catching starlight, power curve steady, as if waiting for the Empire to decide what kind of mistake it wanted to make next. The reply arrived before the boarding craft finished spooling. Imperial. Hails layered across frequencies, formal and exhaustive, citing recovery statutes and salvage rights. Ownership was declared provisional. Inspection teams were authorized, jurisdiction attached automatically. The flotilla commander listened with half an ear, eyes still on the absorption curve, frozen at 94.1%. The human ship answered on a narrow band that cut through protocol like a blade. "This is an Earth vessel," a voice said, calm, unhurried. Identification complete. Further access denied. The commander signaled for clarification, assuming damage or mistranslation. Imperial code phrases were repeated, slower this time, with annotations explaining the benefits of compliance. Boarding would be efficient. Crew would be detained humanely. Technology would be catalogued. The Empire was very good at making refusal sound unreasonable. "Inspection is refused," the human voice replied. "Boarding is refused. Jurisdiction is refused." Refused. The word appeared on the tactical display as an error flag, highlighted by systems that had no procedure for it. The commander frowned and leaned forward. "You are operating an unregistered vessel," they said, "by Imperial law." "Imperial law does not apply," the human interrupted, not raising volume, not accelerating pace. "You are within exclusion distance. Withdraw to 2 light seconds. Power down active scan arrays. We will not pursue." The bridge went quiet. Distance counters read 0.47 light seconds. 3 Imperial cruisers. 1 human ship. The disparity glowed on every board. The commander felt irritation harden into something sharper. "You are advised to reconsider," they said. "Non-compliance will be addressed." There was a pause, measured and deliberate, as if the human crew were conferring. When the voice returned, it carried no edge. "We have reconsidered," it said. "The answer is the same. We decline jurisdiction." The phrase propagated across auxiliary channels, flagged by analysts as a doctrinal statement rather than a negotiation tactic. The human ship's power curve shifted by a fractional margin, nothing dramatic, just enough to be noticed by those watching closely. Internal mass readings adjusted again, compartments rearranging with mechanical purpose. Imperial sensors intensified. Active scans probed the hull, mapping scars and patches, searching for hidden emitters. Returns came back smooth, unhelpful. The ship's silhouette remained stubbornly simple, as if daring classification. Boarding craft reached readiness. Crews, strapped in, weapons safetied for compliance operations that suddenly felt less routine. The commander authorized a countdown marker, a familiar pressure tool. 300 seconds to acknowledge Imperial authority. The timer appeared on the shared channel. The human ship did not comment on it. Instead, a second transmission followed, unencrypted. Brief. "Any attempt to board will be treated as hostile action," the voice said. "We do not initiate violence. We respond to it. No boarding." The words settled heavier than threat. Imperial doctrine relied on escalation ladders, on predictable rungs. This response stepped off the ladder entirely. Analysts fed probabilities into models that insisted the Empire still held overwhelming advantage. The numbers said, "Proceed." The absorption curve said, "Wait." At 120 seconds remaining, the commander opened a private channel to Fleet Command, summarizing the exchange. The response came back clipped and confident. "Proceed with enforcement." The Empire did not negotiate with relics. The human ship held course, silent now, its battered hull steady against the stars. The timer ticked down. Boarding craft drifted. Closer, engines humming. Crews unaware of the exact moment when salvage had become something else entirely. The countdown reached 60. On the human ship, no alarm sounded. On the Imperial bridge, hands hovered over controls that suddenly felt less certain. The refusal had been delivered, the boundary drawn. What remained was the Empire's choice to cross it. The first shot was meant to disable, not destroy. An Imperial cruiser fired a containment beam at 8% output, tuned to scramble power conduits and collapse internal fields without breaching. Whole integrity. The beam struck the human ship along its ventral spine and vanished. No bloom, no harmonic feedback, just absence. Sensors waited. Thermal rise registered for 0.6 seconds, then flattened. Power output aboard the human vessel did not fluctuate. Internal mass readings continued their subtle rearrangement, as if the ship had barely noticed being struck. No effect. A second cruiser joined in. Output raised to 15%. Frequency shifted to induce resonance failure. The beam cut across the human hull and disappeared into scarred plating patched decades earlier. The Empire expected sparks, venting, panic. Instead, energy flowed inward, diffused through layers no scan had resolved, and bled away into heat sinks that did not glow. Absorption efficiency plotted at 92.8%, then corrected to 93.6% as more data arrived. The flotilla commander ordered escalation. All 3 cruisers fired at once, beams overlapping at 30% output. The human ship was bathed in light, bright enough to cast sharp shadows across the Imperial hulls. For 1.9 seconds, the battle space was glare and noise. When it cleared, the human ship was still drifting on its original vector, power curve steady, hull intact. External scars had blackened and flaked away, revealing identical layers beneath. Absorption stable. Analysts leaned closer to their boards. The numbers refused to degrade. Energy that should have overloaded any known system was being swallowed, redirected, and discarded with mechanical indifference. The ship was not shielding, it was metabolizing fire. At 45% output, Imperial emitters began to strain. Cooling systems spiked. One cruiser throttled down to avoid containment loss. The human ship's response remained unchanged. Crew life sign estimates, revised upward now that the vessel was clearly active, held steady at 412. No emergency signals, no evasive maneuvers. A junior officer whispered the question no one wanted to ask. What happens at full power? Answer came too fast to be comfortable. The human ship transmitted a narrowband packet, unencrypted. It contained impact graphs, absorption curves, and a single annotated line stamped with time and scale. Current efficiency, 94.1%, it read. The flotilla commander ordered a final test. One cruiser fired at 70%, violating peacetime. Engagement limits. The beam struck and held for a full 3 seconds. Imperial sensors screamed as feedback rippled through the emitter, heat backing up where it was not supposed to go. The human ship's hull glowed faintly, then dimmed as heat was shunted away through channels that had not existed on the scans moments earlier. Efficiency ticked up to 94.7% before settling back to 94.3%. Physics denied. The phrase appeared in an analyst's private note, flagged for later review and never transmitted. The flotilla commander stared at the numbers, at the way the curve flattened regardless of input. This was not superior shielding. It was a different relationship with energy altogether. Imperial doctrine recalculated engagement outcomes and returned nonsense. Models failed. Safeties tripped. The Empire had weapons designed to break worlds, and they were being treated like environmental noise. The human ship finally altered course, just a fraction of a degree, enough to be unmistakable. Power output rose by 2%, not as a spike. As a decision, demonstration concluded, the human voice said calmly. The cruisers powered down their weapons without being ordered to. No one wanted to be the next variable in an equation they did not understand. The human ship drifted on, scars steaming faintly, absorption curves still glowing on Imperial displays like an accusation. The Empire had fired its best answer at a relic and discovered it was asking the wrong questions entirely. The human ship moved as if inertia were optional. Imperial sensors flagged the change a fraction of a second before belief caught up. The vessel's vector bent inward, not with flare or exhaust bloom, but with a smooth, continuous curve that forced navigation. Systems to recalculate twice before accepting the data. Acceleration climbed past 4G, then 6, then settled at 11, without the spike or oscillation that marked every known drive profile. Impossible vector. At that acceleration, Imperial doctrine predicted structural failure or crew liquefaction. Neither occurred. Life sign estimates aboard the human ship remained flat at 412. Hull integrity readings did not waver. The ship did not strain against its own mass. It carried it as if mass were an internal variable rather than a constraint. The vessel closed distance from 0.47 to 0.31, light seconds in seconds. Not charging, not fleeing. simply arriving where Imperial formation geometry said it should not be able to be. The flotilla commander ordered evasive burns, crisp and immediate. The response fractured the formation instead of preserving it. Timing betrayed them. The human ship cut thrust for 0.6 seconds, then resumed at a new angle. The brief pause forced Imperial targeting solutions to lag, predictions overshooting empty space where the vessel had been. When the beams fired, they missed by kilometers. The human ship slid between firing arcs that had been perfect moments earlier. One ship, 3 cruisers. Distance collapsed again. The vessel passed inside the flotilla's defensive envelope without crossing a single red line the Empire had trained for. Its motion was not erratic. It was anticipatory, as if it knew where the Empire would aim before the order was given. Imperial ships attempted to reorient, drives flaring unevenly as captains fought for separation. The human ship exploited every correction. A cruiser rolled to bring dorsal batteries to bear, and found the human vessel already beneath its firing plane, acceleration vector matched to the cruiser's own rotation. Another tried to widen distance, and instead cut across the human ship's projected path at exactly the wrong moment, forcing an emergency burn that bled momentum and opened its flank, closing fast. The flotilla commander realized the pattern too late. This was not pursuit, it was choreography. Every human maneuver forced an Imperial response that created the next opening. Reaction stacked on reaction until the formation could no longer exist as a coherent shape. At 0.18 light seconds, the human ship executed a lateral shift measured in meters, not kilometers. The move was insignificant by scale and devastating by timing. Imperial fire control desynchronized. Targeting. Windows slipped by fractions of a second that could not be recovered. The human vessel emerged broadside to the formation, weapons ports still closed, as if making a point before finishing the sentence. An Imperial navigator whispered, "It's inside our cycle." They were right. The ship was not outrunning Imperial weapons. It was outrunning Imperial decision-making. Its acceleration curve held steady at 11G, no peaks, no dips, denying the Empire the predictive hooks it relied on. The human vessel transmitted again, brief and informational. Maneuver. Demonstration complete, the voice said. No threat, no triumph. The ship adjusted vector one last time, settling into a position that bracketed the flotilla's command cruiser between itself and empty space. Imperial formations had collapsed into a crowded volume where every maneuver risked collision with an ally. The flotilla commander ordered weapons to track and found firing solutions blocked by their own ships. The human vessel had not fired a shot. It did not need to. As the distance counters stabilized and the Empire struggled to regain shape, the human ship held position, power curve unwavering, having proven that a single hull, if it moved at the right moments, could unmake an entire formation without touching it at all. The first kill was calculated before it was authorized. Imperial command traffic spiked as the flotilla struggled to reform, signals overlapping, priorities colliding. The human ship listened. It did not jam, it did not interfere, it simply mapped the hierarchy as it revealed itself under stress. One cruiser issued corrections, others followed, another relayed fire control synchronizations. The command ship announced itself by trying to sound calm, targets locked. The human vessel's dorsal seams parted without drama, revealing rails that had not appeared on any scan. No glow, no charge whine, just mass prepared for motion. The ship waited until the flotilla's command cruiser rolled 3 degrees to port, compensating for a neighbor's burn. Then it fired. There was no beam, no warning. A tungsten penetrator, 18 meters long and weighing 60 tons, crossed the distance at a relativistic fraction too small to name and too fast to intercept. It struck the command cruiser dead center, passed through shields that never had time to flare, and exited through the engine core. The ship broke not explosively but structurally, its spine failing along load paths never meant to bear that kind of insult. 1. The Empire did not have time to process the loss before missiles followed. They launched in uneven numbers, 5, then 7, then 3, each with a different burn profile. Some flared hot, obvious decoys that drew fire. Others coasted cold, invisible against the background until they adjusted course using the gravity wake of the destroyed cruiser itself. Point defenses tracked the loud ones and celebrated their kills. The quiet missiles arrived untouched. A second Imperial cruiser tried to assume command. Its transponder lit brighter as it broadcast authority it had not expected to need. The human ship adjusted position by meters, not kilometers, and fired again. 2 penetrators this time, timed 0.21 seconds apart. The first stripped the cruiser's shields. The second arrived through the gap the first had made. 2. Imperial captains shouted for spacing, for retreat, for anything that would break the pattern. The pattern did not care. The human ship had already shifted its reference frame. It was no longer firing straight lines. It was firing trajectories that curved, guided not by thrusters, but by the subtle gravity distortions its own motion had created moments earlier. Unknown arithmetic. The phrase appeared on an Imperial analyst's board as a private note, flagged, and ignored. The third command ship attempted to flee, dumping power into its drives in a desperate burn. The maneuver carried it directly into the human ship's prepared solution. A missile detonated at standoff, not to destroy, but to fracture sensors and blind fire control. As the cruiser drifted, railgun fire finished the equation. The ship went dark, systems dead, hull mostly intact. Human weapons ceased immediately. Boarding markers appeared and then held. 3. The remaining Imperial ships fired wildly, energy beams splashing through space that no longer obeyed their expectations. Shots missed or struck debris. One cruiser clipped another while trying to bring guns to bear and tore itself open along the flank. The human ship did not count it as a kill. A final railgun volley fired into empty space ahead of the flotilla. Penetrators curving through gravity wells like thrown stones and arriving from angles no Imperial model covered. A relay ship vanished. Then another. Command coherence collapsed below 30%. Orders degraded into guesses. Human losses remained unchanged. Ammunition tallies updated in clean columns. Railgun rounds fired 9. Confirmed command kills 3. Disabled assets 1. Missile expenditure 27. Time elapsed since first shot 94 seconds. The human ship transmitted, unencrypted. Primary command assets neutralized, the voice said. Further fire unnecessary. Imperial weapons powered down in pockets, some captains choosing survival without waiting for permission. Others hesitated, trapped between fear and doctrine. The human ship did not pursue. It held position, rails cooling, missiles cold, letting the math finish its work. Across the shattered formation, the Empire learned that it was not the size of the weapon that mattered, but the certainty of the calculation behind it. The guns fell silent because the objective had changed. At 94 seconds past first fire, every human weapon powered down in the same breath. Rail capacitors dumped charge. Missile bays sealed. The human ship held position, motionless now, as if velocity itself had been a tool set aside. Imperial vessels waited for the next strike and received a transmission instead. It went everywhere, open band, unencrypted, riding military relays and civilian channels without distinction. The image that resolved was not a commander on a bridge, but a human legal officer framed by data panes and nothing else. Their voice carried without force. It did not need it. This engagement is paused, they said. This is a lawful broadcast. Imperial crews braced for annihilation clauses. None followed. First, the officer said, the ownership, transport, or processing of sentient beings is illegal. Cargo registries unfolded beside the image, lines turning red across dozens of Imperial hulls. Numbers populated beneath them, precise and unavoidable. Estimated enslaved persons identified, 2.1 million. Vessels implicated, 96. Facilities pending seizure, 7. Slavery ends here. The words appeared once and did not repeat. Second, the officer continued, surrender is protected. Conditions followed, stripped of ornament. Power down, offensive. Systems, transmit standard surrender codes. Hold position. Ships meeting these conditions will not be fired upon. Crews will receive medical care. Prisoners will not be harmed. We do not kill prisoners. The doctrine was reinforced immediately, by action. Human targeting systems reclassified compliant hulls in real time. Missiles peeled away mid-course. Rail solutions cleared. The absence of fire carried more weight than any promise. "Third," the officer said, "there will be trials." The word settled heavily across Imperial bridges. Rank does not confer immunity. Command authority does not negate responsibility. Evidence has been recorded. Jurisdiction is asserted. An Imperial legal attaché attempted to interrupt, citing sovereignty and recovery statutes. The officer did not pause. "Sovereignty does not extend to enslavement," they said. "Statutes that permit it are void." Timelines replaced rhetoric. Detention habitats deploying. 6. Judicial panels convening. 3. Initial hearings scheduled within 72 hours. This was not a threat. It was administration. Human craft began to move again, but not to attack. Boarding shuttles launched in controlled numbers, medics visible through viewports, weapons safetied. Damage control drones crossed the void to stabilize crippled Imperial hulls, sealing ruptures, restoring atmosphere where possible. A human ship altered course by meters to avoid debris that might strike a surrendered cruiser. No reprisals. The directive moved through human channels and manifested everywhere at once. Insults shouted in panic went unanswered. Pleas were recorded without comment. Resistance was contained, not punished. The legal officer concluded without emphasis. "You mistook restraint for uncertainty," they said. "This is restraint." The transmission ended. Across the flotilla, captains looked at green markers spreading across their displays and understood that the battle had not paused because humanity lacked force, but because force had achieved what it was meant to. What followed would not be decided by weapons at all. The answer did not come from the battlefield. It came from the observers who had been watching the margins. Coalition sensor arrays, positioned far enough away to survive empires, began pulling archival threads the moment the law broadcast ended. They were not asking how the human ship fought. They were asking where it had learned to. The ship's signature did not match any known upgrade path. Coalition engineers compared hull composition against old Earth registries and found continuity, not replacement. The base alloys were human standard, ancient, by current measures, but layered with structures that could not have been fabricated inside mapped space. Lattice patterns repeated at scales too small for Imperial industry and too large for nanotech. Isotope ratios were wrong in consistent ways, skewed by exposure to radiation fields no chart recorded. It wasn't rebuilt, a Coalition analyst said quietly. It was adapted. Navigation data told the same story. The ship's maneuver, mathematics referenced inertial frames that did not exist on any current star map. Its acceleration curves compensated for distortions that Coalition models labeled theoretical at best. When overlaid against long-range probe losses, a pattern emerged, an absence beyond the rim, a volume of space where signals degraded. Clocks drifted, and nothing returned the same way twice. Years out, the numbers stabilized across multiple datasets. The human vessel had vanished beyond the mapped galaxy for 7 decades by Earth's reckoning. It had not been idle time. Coalition linguists flagged anomalies in the ship's command traffic, terminology that did not appear in any shared database, references to forces described only as pressures, gradients, debts, not names, descriptions. Whatever the ship had encountered, it had not been a civilization that communicated in treaties. Deep scans of the ship's interior, taken during a brief sensor window when the human crew allowed it, revealed something more unsettling. Crew complement remained within human norms. No augmentation spikes, no foreign biology. The change was not in the people. It was in the assumptions the ship made about reality. They learned out there. Coalition historians pulled a record buried in pre-imperial archives, a warning from an extinct exploratory guild about regions where force behaves like weather. The report had been dismissed as metaphor, The human ship's data treated it as engineering. Political analysts ran projections and found no scenario in which the technology aboard the vessel could have been developed under known constraints. The conclusions spread quietly, without drama. Humanity had not stolen this capability. It had survived it. Messages began moving through coalition space, requests for shared observation, for legal alignment, for access to whatever doctrines humanity was preparing to enforce next. This was not fear-driven defection. It was risk management. If the dark beyond the rim was real, then someone who had been there mattered. On the Imperial side, survivors struggled with a simpler truth. The ship they had mocked as salvage was not a relic of the past. It was a scout that had come back changed. Coalition observers logged their final assessment with unusual restraint. The missing Earth vessel had not returned with superior weapons alone. It had returned with proof that the galaxy was incomplete, and that humanity now knew exactly where the edges were. Neutralization resumed without escalation. The human ship did not announce a second phase. It adjusted posture, and the battlefield changed around it. Imperial vessels still broadcasting active fire control signals found their targeting degraded first, quietly, without jamming. Solutions drifted. Lock times stretched. Beams fired a fraction late or early and struck nothing at all. The first surrender came from the periphery. A light Imperial escort powered down weapons and transmitted standard distress codes, its captain choosing calculation over doctrine. Human systems acknowledged instantly. The ship's marker shifted from red to green. No fire followed. Nearby captains noticed. Within 20 seconds, 3 more followed suit. Surrender works. The phrase appeared on coalition observation boards as a behavioral note, not propaganda. The human ship applied pressure only where resistance persisted. Missiles launched in pairs, never salvos, each flight path unique. They detonated at standoff distances, tuned to crush sensors and propulsion without breaching hulls. A cruiser lost engines and rolled helplessly, its captain transmitting surrender before the tumble completed. Human weapons ceased immediately, in mid-sequence, as if the order had been waiting. Precision replaced volume. An Imperial destroyer attempted to flank, firing engines hard to exploit the human ship's apparent isolation. The maneuver intersected a timing window the human ship had already modeled. A railgun round, not aimed at the destroyer, but at the space it would occupy, arrived first. The slug passed close enough to shred external systems without touching the hull. The destroyer went blind and silent, drifting. Boarding markers appeared and held. No unnecessary kills. The directive was never broadcast, but it governed every action. Human fire control ignored targets already breaking off, even when efficiency demanded finishing them. The cost was measured, in seconds, and accepted without debate. Imperial Command attempted one last consolidation, rallying remaining ships around a heavy cruiser broadcasting emergency authority codes. The human ship responded with motion rather than fire. It shifted vector by meters, not kilometers, exploiting the same impossible acceleration profile that had broken the flotilla earlier. The cruiser's escorts overcorrected, trying to maintain formation, and collided. The heavy cruiser's shields flared under friendly fire and collapsed. A missile detonated at standoff. The cruiser powered down and surrendered. The cascade accelerated. At 18 minutes, surrendered ships outnumbered hostile. E1's 2-1, at 27, 4-1. Crews watched neighbors survive compliance exactly as promised. Panic burned out and was replaced by arithmetic. Survival favored green markers. Boarding operations followed behind the collapse, methodical and restrained. Human shuttles approached disabled hulls at controlled relative velocities. Breach. Teams moved in pairs, security and medics, sealing compartments, venting where resistance persisted, waiting where it did not. There were no shouted orders, no celebrations. The work resembled disaster response more than combat. A carrier attempted, a final gesture, launching strikecraft in a massed wave meant to overwhelm defenses. Human response was precise and non-lethal. Point defense grids shaped the flow. electromagnetic pulses frying guidance systems without detonating warheads. Fighters tumbled powerless, pilots ejecting into vacuum where rescue beacons activated, automatically. Human ships altered course to avoid debris that might endanger surrendering hulls. Do not fire on green. The rule held even as green-marked ships drifted across optimal firing solutions against the last hostile targets. Human gunners adjusted, letting windows pass. Efficiency dipped, no one objected. The final resistance ended not with an explosion, but with silence. An Imperial cruiser, engines dead, weapons cooling, transmitted surrender codes and cut power. Human systems acknowledged. All remaining weapons went cold. At 41 minutes, the battlefield stabilized. Hundreds of Imperial hulls drifted in ordered clusters, marked green, their crews waiting. Human ships moved among them like custodians, deploying repair drones, establishing traffic lanes, preventing collisions. Damage control beams stitched hulls closed. Atmospheres equalized. Prisoner counts updated in clean columns. 2.1 million secured. Injured, treated, 318,000. Fatalities ceased entirely once the last hostile marker disappeared. A coalition observer, watching from a safe remove, noted the absence of triumph. This had not been conquest. It had been demonstration, force applied, just long enough to prove it could stop. The human ship held position at the center of the drifting armada, scars still visible, power curve steady. It transmitted one final line, informational rather than declarative. Engagement complete, it said. The Empire's remaining ships did not move. They did not need to be told what that meant. Order replaced violence with deliberate speed. Human. Boarding schedules prioritized need over rank. Atmospheres were stabilized first, then gravity, then medical access. Injured Imperial crew were triaged without comment, species tags flashing briefly before dissolving into the same neutral queue. Painkillers flowed. Fractures were set. Bleeding stopped. The process moved with practiced calm, as if it had been rehearsed long before this moment. No reprisals. The directive propagated with the same authority as a firing command. Human Marines escorted prisoners with weapons slung low, restraints applied only where resistance had already occurred. Those who complied walked unbound. Those who did not were isolated, recorded, and transferred without spectacle. Every interaction, generated data, biometrics, testimony, command lineage, fed into a legal system already awake and waiting. Temporary detention habitats unfolded from cargo holds, modular and sterile. Food met dietary requirements calculated down to trace elements. Translators rendered instructions in neutral tones, stripped of accusation. Prisoner counts stabilized at 2.1 million. Fatalities did not increase. The numbers mattered, and the humans treated them like promises. Across the system, civilian traffic resumed under human advisories. Relief convoys arrived along vectors cleared, though hours earlier, bearing markings of worlds that had never publicly aligned with Earth. Coalition observers watched the manifests populate and recognized the pattern immediately. Neighboring systems were not waiting for invitations, they were submitting filings. Declarations arrived in steady sequence. Suspension of imperial tribute. Opening of ports to human oversight. Requests for arbitration under the statutes broadcast, during the pause in fighting. Political gravity shifted not with speeches or threats, but with paperwork processed in real time. We accept these terms. The phrase appeared again and again, identical phrasing traced to a public template released, minutes after the law broadcast. Analysts flagged it as mimetic adoption driven by observed outcomes rather than ideology. The humans did not comment. Trials were scheduled before the last boarding action completed. Jurisdiction packets listed charges with unemotional clarity: enslavement, unlawful processing, command responsibility. Evidence hashes linked censor, logs, cargo records, and testimony collected under continuous verification. Command personnel flagged earlier, 173 individuals after reconciliation, were separated and transferred under guard that neither tightened with anger nor softened. with pleading. An imperial provincial governor attempted to negotiate amnesty in exchange for immediate realignment. The response came from a legal officer, not a commander. Alignment does not erase crimes, they said. The channel closed. In the detention habitats, rumors spread faster than fear. Crews compared treatment. They noticed that surrender had worked exactly as promised. They noticed that no one had been spaced, no compartments flooded, no reprisals, taken for shouted insults or delayed compliance. The lesson settled unevenly but permanently. At 120 hours, the first liberated populations were transferred off seized vessels. Families emerged into gravity they had not chosen, blinking under. Lights calibrated for comfort rather than efficiency. Human medics stepped aside as civilian agencies took over, their role complete. The human ship remained on station, its hull scarred but stable, patches clean and functional rather than symbolic. A final operational note propagated through command. Channels. Force applied, compliance achieved, order established. In distant systems, leaders weighed defiance against evidence moving through every relay. Green markers honored, surrender protected, trials inevitable. The choice was no longer abstract. Humanity had not taken territory. It had offered an order, and shown, without haste or cruelty, what accepting it looked like. The silence after compliance was deliberate. Imperial hulls drifted in ordered clusters, green-marked and stable. Relief traffic moved under human advisories. Trial packets queued. From a distance, the battle space looked resolved, its violence folded neatly into administration. Human sensors did not stand down. Deep-range arrays kept their baselines stretched far beyond the patrol envelope, listening past noise, past debris, past the habits of known space. At 19 hours post-engagement, one array returned a persistence that resisted subtraction. Analysts flagged it, reran filters, widened baselines. The persistence held. It matched an old ghost. The signature lay beyond mapped lanes at a distance measured, in tens of thousands of astronomical units, arriving on a vector that ignored corridors and did not respect mass shadows. Its profile bent clocks by fractions and smeared emissions into gradients rather than spikes. The algorithms tagged it automatically, then locked the tag when 3 independent arrays concurred. Same signal. The annotation appeared once and stayed. Command convened without alarms. And broadcast interrupted relief operations. The data moved through compartments that had existed since before the ship vanished, planning cells with headers already written, contingencies already numbered, timelines populated. The numbers were not comforting. They were familiar. A coalition observer, cleared under emergency protocol, asked the question everyone else avoided. "Is that what changed you?" The reply came after a pause measured in care, not doubt. "It's where we learned," the human voice said, meaning the Empire had never been the edge. The human ship adjusted station by a fraction of a degree, aligning long-range sensors with the incoming persistence. Power curves remained steady. Ammunition tallies updated. Training rotations shifted quietly. Messages went out to systems that had filed acceptance. No threats, no demands, only data and schedules. Not over. Beyond the rim, the signal advanced with patient inevitability, indifferent to law, surrender, or mercy. Whatever it was, it had shaped the ship that returned, and it was coming again. Humanity watched without haste, the same calm that had ended a battle settling into something older and colder. The calculations resumed, not to win an argument, but to meet a condition, already understood.